Okay, so this video is going to cover creating a section drawing in Rhino. We'll go over some of the Rhino drafting tools here under the drafting tab. Then we'll talk about how to export that line work into AutoCAD, how to edit the line work in AutoCAD and add annotations and other things, and then export or print a PDF out of AutoCAD. So it's going to be a workflow that involves both Rhino and AutoCAD, really for the purpose of drafting a 3D model or drafting something that we've modeled in Rhino. So we have this model. We're going to first create a section. So we want to cut a section through this building and bring that into AutoCAD. So the way we do that is the clipping plane tool. So if you type clipping plane, enter, and before you select anywhere, if you click vertical, you can have this be a vertical clipping plane. And we want this to be orthogonal to the plan itself. So I'm going to hold shift down before I click a second time and then zoom out, click a third time. And so you'll see that what's happening is this drawing is this model is being sliced. And so this plane represents the clipping plane itself. This line represents the direction that we're looking. Okay, so if it's clipping the wrong thing and I realize I actually want to look the other direction, I can select this. Using my gumball, I can rotate that 180 degrees, and now it's clipping in the other direction. So make sure that your clipping plane is in the correct dimension and you can orient it that way. So what I'm going to do is clip about here. I'm going to rotate this back 180, and this is a good enough section. I have the structure turned on, so we're seeing the roof trusses. We're seeing this double parallam beam in the middle of the house, and this house is modular, so this is 2 C-channels that detach. The whole house detaches here, here, and here. So this whole thing can come apart in the real world. And what we're going to do today is make sure that we're looking at this view as a projected line drawing. So we're going to look at it flat and then create a make 2D out of that. Okay, so one way to do that, I'm in parallel here. We're going to go to standard. If you click on this drop down arrow next to the car, you'll see that there's different C-plane orientation, so views of the C-plane, so I can look at it from the front, from the side. So I'm going to go right view of the C-plane. So what that does is it gives me a orthographic view, projected view from the right side. And if I hold shift and right mouse click, I can pan and it won't orbit or orient this in another direction. Okay, so I can also double click and find front view or side view, whichever is corresponding, and look at it from that view as well. But once I have what I'm looking for, I can select all of this, except the clipping plane. I hold Control and select anything I don't want. And then once I've selected everything I want to make in this way, I'm going to type make 2D. And so it's going to generate a 2D drawing from our 3D model. I'm going to uncheck hidden lines because that's going to add too much confusion to this. It's a bunch of lines that don't actually show up in the view. It's just kind of background line work that would be dashed. But that would be confusing, so we're going to uncheck that. Scene silhouette gives this heavy perimeter line. We could uncheck that or leave it checked. It's up to you. And I'm going to hit OK. And this is going to be the layer that it creates this on. So I'm going to hit OK. and it's generating that 2D line drawing. And now when I go over here, it's being clipped, right? It was, that line work is here, but since my clipping plane is here, I'm not actually seeing it. So if I move this over, now it will be visible and I can inspect this drawing. And so I can go into top view, or just do this, go to top view, and now right click will just pan. And so I have this drawing, and it's a decent drawing. There's usually some cleanup involved whenever you do a Make 2D in Rhino. You'll want to clean up any extraneous lines, like when we zoom in on this, you know, you don't want to see all of that. So we can do some trimming here. I can select this, type trim, and trim some of these extended lines. Maybe this one. You select the boundary first, hit trim, and then select the extended portion. So you can go through and clean up the drawing that way. If you find some extraneous things like this, you'll want to delete them. But it's good to, you know, eliminate the little things that will get in the way. But this is important. This is a C stud, so this is part of the framing. So we may want to include that. Little things like pulls for the casework, we're going to include that. And this is showing the steel C-channel under the house here, and we're actually going to have some floor joists under this as well. It's not just the steel C-channel perimeter. There was a Clark Dietrich steel floor joist system that runs under the house here. So that should be drawn. This is extraneous line work, just floating lines. I'm going to select these, delete them, select these, delete. And the rest of this is the stem wall. So we modeled the stem wall. This is going to get a concrete hatch. If we go back, we can refer to the original model here. Go back to 3D view. So this is what we're looking at. We're slicing that stem wall in 3 places, and we're looking at this back portion in elevation. So ideally what we would do is use a hatch to fill in these 3, because we're cutting through them. That would be a concrete hatch. And then this, we would just be looking at it in elevation, so we wouldn't actually see that as a hatch. So let's go to Rhino, and we'll introduce the drafting tab. So in Rhino, you have the ability to create layouts and sheets. So for example, if we want to add, and what a layout is it's basically a 2-dimensional drawing that you can place viewports on. So if I want to have 5 different views on the same layout, I can do that. I can have a floor plan, I can have a detail drawing, I can have a 3D view, all on the same layout. So if you go up here to layout, so if you left mouse click, it'll give you a layout with 4 details. So I can click on that. And under view layout properties, this, you can change the size of your page. You can give it an actual printer. You can set this to be a custom size. I'm just going to use an 8.5 by 11 landscape, leave this as is. And it defaulted to 4 layouts here. So this is the top view. I can double click on this, zoom in, and you'll see the functionality of this. Then I double click out here, and now I can kind of move in this. So let's say I wanted to have my section here. I wanted to double click on this. I want to have a 3D view here. Double click, and I can double click, and I can select an object and type hide in detail, and it's going to hide it just in that viewport. So that's a really useful command when you're working with layouts, because there's often things that I want to see in one view that I don't want to see in another view. So I also want to look, let's say, at one of the elevations of this. Actually, yeah, let's see. Double click, I can zoom in, and I'll do that. Double click out. Actually, double click, and I can set this to either shaded view. We can go into pen, so it'll do a kind of a simple line drawing of that model. Takes a minute to think, especially because this is the complex facade. This is our perforated screen. So you can assign different drawing styles to each view. So let's say I want line weights to show up here and this to be a line drawing. This one, maybe I want this to be Arctic view. Maybe this one I want to just be a pen kind of line drawing. I can set each one to have a different view style. Okay, so that was taking too long. I'm just going to set this to shaded and double click out. I can set this to another elevation and double click out. Well, we'll set this to maybe Arctic, and then I'm going to hide this clipping plane. Select it, hide in detail, enter. Now it's gone. I'll go into Arctic view here too. Not artistic. Arctic. Select, hide in detail. Okay, so if I want to have multiple views in the same page, this is the way I would do it. I could even double click this. We'll go into Arctic here as well. Alright, so this drawing is going to include some callouts, so it'll include some hatches as well. And again, whenever you double click on a viewport, it's going to make that active, so you can start editing it. You can you can make changes, and it'll make those changes as long as you're in this viewport. It'll make them in the entire model. So just realize if you were to click and start making a box here, it should show up in the rest of the model as well. Anyway, so one thing we can do, so for this line drawing, we're going to hatch what's in here. So we want to use a concrete hatch, so I can select this, type hatch, and it's going to give you all of the options that come with Rhino. These are the default hatch options for lines and grids. This is good for rigid foam insulation. Some of these line hatches could be great for showing plywood, or showing maybe a diagonal hatch for the earth. So this is set to solid. We can yeah, I guess what we could do is we can leave that solid for now, hit OK, and we can do the same thing for these other portions of the stem wall. Type hatch, enter, and leave those solid black. The other place you would find hatch is here. It's also hatch base, hatch scaling, so you can scale the If this were a pattern, you could scale it. And then we could also add annotations. So if I double click out, I could add annotations here. So using this leader tool, you can do this. And then when you hit enter, you can add text. We can say caps standing seam metal roof on underlayment on OSB tongue and groove sheathing on rigid foam insulation. And we can change the size of that. So if you select it, you'll notice under properties, we can change the height of the text. So I can set this to 0.05, enter, it'll change the height. And I can change a lot of things. I can change the size of that leader. So that arrow type is pretty tall. I want to use a different font, I can change that. So I can go to Franklin Demi Condensed. I can set the arrow size here, so I can say 0.05. And you can edit virtually every part of this. Model space, margins, all of that can be modified here. So you can duplicate this. I can hold Alt and then drag this down and bring the tip of this leader to the truss. We can edit the text by double clicking on it. We can say light gauge steel truss, say galvanize. And so you can call out all of the unique aspects of the project or things that a contractor will have questions on to make things easier. So that can be drawn. So that's using the leader tool here. So you can type leader or find it. You can take dimensions. So if we want to do vertical dimensions, let's see. Those can be taken as well. And the same thing, you can select the dimension and then edit it under properties here. You can set the height, the scale, model space scale. So right now this is 0.2. If I set that to 0.1, nothing happens. But I can set the height of it here too. So I can say 0.05 like I did for the annotations. Oh yeah, model space scale probably didn't apply because I'm not in model space, I'm in the layout. So if this were, if I double clicked, did the same thing, vertical dimension, selected this, went to model space scale, you can set this to 1 or let's say 100. So it'll change the scale of all of this. I'm going to set this to 5, and it's being cropped off here so you're not seeing the whole thing. I can select these grip points and move this over so that it stays within my drawing here. And you can select this and modify all of these. So just be aware that can be changed. If you select this and move one of these grips, it's going to tell you that it broke the history on that object, meaning it's connected to this model, and by moving it manually, it's no longer associated with that geometry anymore. So you'll want to keep it kind of associated with that. And you'll notice when I'm zooming, it's keeping these annotations where they are. That's because they weren't drawn in the model space. They were drawn in this layout in the viewport. So these are just going to stay where they are regardless of my drawing, unless I want to copy it. Control C. I can double click into here, Control V. Actually, I'll have to redraw it, but it's the same idea here. Hit Enter, text, and now when I zoom in, I can change the scale of that drawing, and it changes the scale of that leader as well. So you can set that to 2. You can scale with the grips here. So that is scaling with my zoom because I did it in the model space. But what that means also is that that text annotation will show up in other views where text is visible. So it may be a good thing. You may want to leave it in the actual sheet like this and just delete it here. But you'll want to double check, make sure those correspond. Okay. And so you can hatch anything that is being cut through. So for example, in Rhino, if we want to hatch this portion of the C channel, we can type hatch or click on hatch. And there's a couple ways we can do this. We can select all the line work we want to hatch, enter, hit OK. Same thing, hatch, select the line work. Sometimes it needs a little help kind of determining what the boundary of the hatch is. So we want to give it all of the line work that's needed. And then click inside, hit enter, and then it'll hatch that portion. So it's looking for a closed boundary. It's looking for a way to create an enclosed fill. All right, so that could happen for any of the C channel studs, the flooring that we're cutting through. Anything that's being cut, you could hatch. So these stem walls, these could also be hatched. So I could type hatch, boundary curves, yes. Click inside, hit enter, and then hit OK. So you can hatch everything that's being cut in this section. You can take overall dimensions. There's other dimensions you could use. Vertical, this is an aligned dimension. So I can take a dimension from that exterior surface of wall. If I hold shift, it'll keep it orthogonal. And then if I select this, I can hit match, and I can select something that I want it to match the style of. So I can match that. And right now these dimensions are, let's see, if I were to type units, it's showing that my units are in feet. So the scale of this is a little off. So this is saying that's 388 feet, which I know is incorrect. So if I just measure a distance of something that I know, this should be about 10 inches. And that is, so that's right. but it looks like this maybe dimension string isn't correct here. 35 feet, that's about right. If we go to edit style, we can change the way that this text dimension is being read. Length units, we can set this, right now it's in inches, we'll set this to feet and inches, and I'm going to hit OK, and so that'll change it for both of these. So it's going to set the units to feet and inches. And let's say we don't want that level of tolerance, maybe we want to round to a ½ inch. I can do the same thing. I can select on that, say edit style, scroll down. This is the linear resolution. It's set to 1/4 inch. I'm going to set that to ½ inch and hit OK. And now it's going to round it. So it just rounded that to 14 foot 4 inches. And I'm going to pull this out. Okay, so this extension line is going up a little high, so I can edit that. So dimension lines, let's see, fixed length extension. Let's see, so changing that. We'll change what? The extension line here. .4. So that'll change that distance. Then selecting this, we can set the extension line extension to 0.2. So that's not as long now. And if I want to match that style, I can select this one, or select this one, go to match, select the one I want, and it'll do that for both. So you can take overall dimensions, aligned dimensions. You can grab the angle. So if I want to get the angle of this roof, I would just select 2 lines. Arc for first line, second line, and it'll give me the angle. It's really small here, but if I select that and edit the style, I can change the font size. We can set this to length factor, we'll set that to 5. Font, we'll set this to 3, hit apply, and it'll give you a preview. Set that to 2. Okay, so that's a way to get angular dimensions, to grab the kind of radius of that curve. You can take linear dimensions. You can set line types, so you can change certain lines to be dashed or have a heavier line weight. Annotation styles, documentation, edit text. You can have just free-floating text. And the Make 2D command is actually here under the Drafting tab. So these dimensions got scaled up somehow. So editing this, I think our model space scale, that should be set to 1. So we can bring that down. then just make sure 1 and 1. This should be 1 and 1. Alright, so once we've done that and we're happy with, you know, the drafting here, so we can zoom out and zoom back in, make this kind of a line. And again, I'd recommend creating these annotations actually in the drawing. That way we don't have this scaling issue. But we'll leave these here for now. I can always move this dimension line if needed, bring that down. You never want to have line work overlapping other text or other line work or dimensions or callouts. All of that should be separated and free floating. So that's something to keep in mind. Looks a little big to me here, so I'm going to set the model space, or I'll set the height here to 0.5, enter. Same thing with this dimension, 0.5. We don't want to have situations like this where you have the leaders intersecting the dimension string here. So we can place those, if we were to redo this, we could place those somewhere else, but I'm going to leave this for now. Okay, so once we're happy with this, we can print it, and printing is easy. Just Control P or File, Print. And when you see that, you'll notice it's going to print this page. So we can tell it what to print. So I can either have one of these views, I could set it to this page 5 that I created. All right, that's this view that I'm in. And let's say we don't want the colors. I just want this to be a black and white line drawing. I can set the print color or the output color to black and white. And I can change this. Right now it's set to an image file. You can set this to Rhino PDF, so it'll generate a PDF out of this. It's set to 600 DPI. That's one of the latest settings I've set. So you can set this to usually 300 at the most, but it's nice having a high level of resolution in that drawing. So I'm going to leave it at 600. Raster is pixels, vector is line work or vectors. So I'm going to leave this as raster so that it can handle the rest of these 3D views, shaded views well. And I'm going to hit print. So once I print this, I'll put it on my desktop. Call this section sheet. So it's generating a PDF from this entire sheet. So from this whole layout, I'll have a PDF. So if I go to my desktop and find that file, you'll see that it's using a heavier line weight for the things that it's cutting through, so that's a good start. You can bring this into Illustrator and edit line weights. You can also edit the line weights in Rhino. The other thing we can do is export this drawing into AutoCAD. So we'll show you how to do that. Going first back into Rhino, I'm going to double click on this. We'll go into top view here. I can select this and type export. I can then export this as an AutoCAD file. You can export it as a DWG or a DXF. Either will work. And we'll call this building section 1 as a DWG. I'm going to leave the default settings there and then hit OK. And from there I can open up AutoCAD Control O for open. Find that exported drawing that I just created. And there's often scale issues when you're going from Rhino to AutoCAD, Rhino to Revit. You have to always double check that. So I'm going to type DI for distance and just do a quick measurement. I know the C channel should be about 10 inches, and it just told me that that was 13/16 of an inch. So that means we do need to scale it. I think I know that we're going to have to scale it by 12. I think it's reading it in inches when it's really in feet. But for example, I know the distance between this and this is exactly 1 foot, so that'll help me to scale this. So I can select all of this and I can type scale, SCALE, or SC is the shortcut for that. And when you scale in AutoCAD, there's a couple ways to do it. You can scale with a reference. So I can click once, type R, enter for reference, click, click, and again it's asking for a reference. So it's saying, okay, those 2 points that you selected, what's the actual distance there? So I'm going to type 1 foot, enter, zoom out, and now when I type distance, or DI, it's giving me 1 foot as that distance, and it just scaled up the whole drawing accordingly. So the scale tool, SC, takes a little bit of added work to get the drawing to scale with a reference, but it's a good start to that. I'm going to delete these dimensions that came out of Rhino. AutoCAD, if you go to Home, you'll see that there's a whole annotation tab here with dimensions. You'll see linear dimension, and so I can take dimensions from these. If you select on that, right, like that dimension, we can edit the properties of it. So these are layer properties. I have these docked on the left. I also have properties here on the left. And so this has a whole series of, just like in Rhino, text size, font size, all of that. So text here, I want that to be bigger. Text height will say 1 foot. And if we don't like the font of this word, so you can change the font type and style of the dimension by typing dim style, enter, and we can create a new dimension style. So I'm going to hit new. We'll call this arc drafting, and hit continue. And so it's going to give me options for the lines that it's using, the symbols and arrows. So is this going to be an arrow, or is it going to be an architectural diagonal tick mark? The text, I can change the font here, how it fits, and then primary units, alternate units. So you can have text show up underneath. If you want to show both, imperial and metric, you can do that. But I'm going to change the lines. I'm just going to set the line type. I'm going to leave this extension from origin, looks okay. The symbols and arrows, I can set these to architectural tick. So those are those diagonal tick marks. Leader, I'll leave close filled. Break size looks okay, and it's going to give you a preview of it here. So text, I'm going to use a different text. So I'm going to create a new text here. We'll call this arc drafting. And I'm going to set the font to, let's say, Franklin Demi-Gothic condensed, and I'm going to set the rest of this. I'm going to say set current, save changes, yes, close. So I've now applied that. I'm going to set this to arc drafting, so now it's going to use that font when I create dimensions, and I will hit OK. Hit OK. And this is now set to arc drafting, which I'm OK with. And I can select this, go to Properties, Dim Style, set that to arc drafting. Looks like the scale of it is a little off, so I'm going to change this. So if I select the dimension and I go to Properties, I can scroll down, I can set the text, the dim scale overall. We can set this to maybe 50 and it'll bring that down. If I type dim style again, I can still edit this by going to selecting arc drafting, go to modify, and I can set the units, so primary units. I want, instead of decimal, I want architectural, so it'll give me feet and inches, and I'm going to hit OK, close. So now it's giving me a really high level of precision. We don't need 9/16 of an inch level of precision in this overall building dimension. So I'm going to go back to dim style again, modify, and set my precision. Instead of 1/16 inch, we'll set this to 1/4 inch. So now it's rounding this overall dimension. Okay, so then I can go in and dimension the drawing, and here I have layers docked on my left. If this isn't here, in your case, you can type LA, enter, and this will show up. You can dock it on the left so that it's persistent. You can set that. Often in Rhino, a lot of these layers that show up as black line weight show up in black in AutoCAD, which you really want those to be white, so that when it prints, it shows up. Either way, it'll print as black, but we want to set this to be white. And so you can go in and change the colors of different layers here. You can add, so this is all in the Home tab. I've been adding these dimensions. You can click on leader, so we can add a leader the same way we did in Rhino. And I can say metal fascia over OSB backing, and then click. I can select this, and under properties we can set the multi-leader style. So this is set to standard style by M. If you type M leader style, you can do the same thing we just did for the dimension. So you can then modify this, or we'll create a new one. Okay, call it arc drafting. We can make our own leader style here. Continue. I'm going to set my symbol is closed filled. We want that. This line weight type, leader structure. This is good. I'm going to set my text style to arc drafting, so we've already done that. If we edit this, let's see. Yeah, I guess that's fine. So once we're happy with that, I can hit OK. Arc drafting, close, and this still hasn't updated, so I'm going to select it, go to properties, and set arc drafting here, and then we can also set, scrolling down, we can set the overall scale of this. Overall scale, there it is. We'll set this to 50, too big, set it to 20, better. Okay, so you can change each of these by selecting them, go to properties, and it's that overall scale that you want to modify. Dim overall, that's too large, so we'll set this to 20. So you can change your text size that way, dimensions, and then if you go to annotate, there's other tabs. You can create center marks or center lines. Multi-leader commands are here. So if you're working and you have a drawing, I'm gonna duplicate this, and in AutoCAD you can type copy or CO, enter is the shortcut. If I want to keep something aligned, I'm gonna hold shift to keep it vertical. I'm just going to hit shift a few times to copy this leader down, and then I can just call out various aspects of the drawing. Call out the wall, assembly itself, hold shift. And let's say when I created these that maybe this was out here. There's a way to align these in AutoCAD. You can select them, and you'll see this command here. This is align, and you can select the one that you want it to align to. Right, I want that to be my guiding annotation. Then I hold shift, and it keeps it vertical. So that's a great way to align many different annotations at once. So this is my metal fascia over OSB backing, and I'm being kind of vague here so that if the specification changes, it can, doesn't have to update everything. We'll call this clear story window. All caps whenever you use architecture text. Window, we'll say awning. And for this wall, I'll just call out the exterior here. And for our exterior, we have 7/8 inch stucco on metal lath and building paper on 1 inch rigid, it's rigid foam insulation, a product called Ox-IS, 1 inch rigid foam, and that includes Ox-IS sheathing. So it's 1 inch Ox-IS foam, rigid foam, structural sheathing. So there's an 1/8 inch structural sheathing component to that foam, so it's all laminated together. And that's on metal stud on 5/8 inch gypsum board, or gypsum board. Okay, so this is kind of listing the composition of that wall from the outside, working our way in. So it's going from outside to in, telling us the entire composition of that. We should also add the insulation. So this is rigid foam, metal studs. We'll say on this was spray foam insulation, and our entire wall assembly had an R value of R27, so that's a resistance to heat, R27, and the requirement is that that only be R21, so we're going above the R value that's required so that this house is very well insulated. Okay, so I could go in and call out other things here, but this is a spray foam insulation. So the way we represent spray foam is with a kind of a bubble curve. So there's a specific line type that we would use for that. Anyway, if we were to use bat insulation, we could draw a line, and I would create a new layer for this. I'm going to create a new layer here, and again, this is under layers. So if you don't have this docked, type LA, hit enter, and then you can dock it on the left or right. If you have multiple monitors, you can dock this on one monitor so you're not wasting real estate here. So I'm going to set this to bat insulation. Create a new layer for that. I'm going to change the color, and I like to use index colors so that these are standard. And I'm going to create a line and set the line type here. We're going to create a line type that has it's great for insulation, for bat insulation. So I'm going to load, scroll down to batting, hit OK, select that, hit OK, and now when I hit this line, I'm going to have the option of going to batting, and I can now add bat insulation in my floor or in my wall or in the roof, holding shift to keep it horizontal. If you see LT scale, so LT scale, you can set a scale for all of the line work in the drawing. So I'm going to set this to 10. And it's going to update the kind of the scale of the line weights themselves. So I can draw another line. Let's say I want this one to be more slender. So I'm going to pull this out. We're going to just kind of draw up to here. Enter. And if I want to bring this scale down, I'm going to change the line weight, bring that down here. Okay, so if I want to change the scale of this bat insulation, I can select it, go to properties, and then set this line type scale for that particular line to 0.5, and it'll scale it down. So that's the way we change the size of the bat insulation in AutoCAD. Okay, so I could go in and I could add a hatch to this, similar to what we did in Rhino. So if I type hatch, it's going to try to find an internal point. So if I just mouse over this, so we've hit hatch, hit enter. I can select this, I can change the scale because it's too small right now. I want to set this to 10. And I can set the angle. Right now this is kind of a diagrid. I want to set that to 45. so that that's horizontal. We can actually make this align, so we can change this angle so that it's parallel with the roof slope. Let's say 53, 55, yeah, close enough. So we have our rigid foam insulation here. This is the standing seam metal, but that's a quick tutorial on how to create hatches, how to add annotation, dimensions. Another thing that we can do is plot this or print it as a PDF. So at first, when we brought this file in from Rhino, you'll notice that this line work all had different colors. That's actually because we imported this file from Revit, so it assigned a separate color for each family type, it looks like. And so that's why these were color coded. We brought them into AutoCAD, and from there we can set each of these to be white. So if I select multiple layers at once by holding Shift and then clicking, I can change these to the index color white to get everything to show up as white in my model space and to print as black when I plot them. The other thing I want to do is set the line weight here. We can change, well, looking at these, so in the background, maybe this could be a lighter line weight. We'll set that to 0.05. This is more in the foreground. Maybe we set these to 0.3. Set this to default. So you can change the line weights here under layer properties. And then to print, just straight from model space, you can hit Control P, and we will go to Adobe PDF. I'm just going to use a letter size, landscape, scale. We'll use 1/4 inch, and we're going to plot a window. And I'm just going to draw the window. It's a little large, but I'm going to hit preview. And zooming in, we're seeing that a heavier line weight is being given to everything that's being cut because we assigned a heavy line weight to that particular layer. And then things that are just shown in elevation, cabinetry, furniture, that gets a lighter line weight. So that's pretty good. That's what we're looking for here.